Ciao. In which we can be in instant contact with each other, wherever we may be, where we can contact our friends anywhere on Earth, even if we don't know their actual physical location.
I say, yay.
Yay, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of regulation.
Oh, wow, you've just rolled right into the next thing. Jeez, I should probably start the timer or something and be prepared to say things like, Tom Merritt is here with us, everybody. Tom Merritt. I Keep Going Daily Tech News Show. You mentioned Sword and Laser earlier. Remind people, would you?
Sword and Laser is one of the longer shows that I've done. It itself is only around a half hour, but yeah. I've been doing it for a long time. It may be the second longest running show that I do with Veronica Belmont, and it's a science fiction fantasy book club. That's pretty much the long and the short of it. Every episode of the podcast, we'll talk about either the book we're about to read or wrap up the book that we just finished reading, as well as other book news in science fiction and fantasy and comments from the audience. So check it out, swordandlaser.com.
Is science fiction, not to get too much into your personal life, is science fiction all you read, or do you read other stuff as well?
It almost is everything I read at this point, because I read so slowly. And years ago, we were on Felicia Day's Geek and Sundry Network, and Felicia required us to read a book a month. Well, she didn't require, but she's like, well, if you're doing a show for me, you're doing one a month. I'm like, okay. And we've stuck to that ever since, even though we're not on that network anymore. So yeah, most of what I read is science fiction and fantasy now.
All right. I'm reading The Good Earth.
Nice.
Not science fiction.
No, not so much.
I'm having difficulty with it.
Yeah,
I'm having difficulty with the messages in it, actually.
I'm actually reading horror because Veronica picked a horror book. Where I'm reading Nosferatu by Joe Hill.
Well, and if people want to hear about that, so when do they have to listen? Is that going to be an October thing because Halloween, that sort of thing? Or is that? Yeah,
that's our October pick. Okay. We sort of kicked it off on the last episode. We talk about it a little, but the big discussions will be coming in October.
So we'll actually probably talk more about a particular book on tomorrow's edition of this show, but let's go ahead and go into the thing that you actually tried to get us into a couple of minutes ago, which is the regulation deal. So the EC came out last week and said something that people had been expecting them to say for quite a while. We want every smartphone sold in the EU to use USB-C as your power port. And apparently, if this goes through, if the European Parliament goes ahead and says, yay, though they, trade in the valley of regulation, if they say yay, then by 2024, every phone sold in the European Union, every smartphone sold in the European Union will have to use USB-C as its power port. Now, you got to figure Apple already has the 2024, at least a rough idea of what the 2024 is going to look like. I mean, even if it's just the very beginning. And chances are, they may have put USB-C in it because, of course, they've got USB-C running on, a lot of their other hardware, if not all of their other hardware. Mm-hmm. And yet there is now this possibility that whatever they were planning to do doesn't matter. If they want to sell it in the EU, they're going to have this. Start me off with what you think of the proposed regulation.
Yeah, I put it this way. I, as a person, would love all my devices to use USB-C if they have a charging port. I don't need to have USB-C in my watch because it doesn't need a charging port. Right. But if it's going to have a charging port, I would like it to have USB-C at this point. Just because it's a good standard and having everything on one means I don't have to worry about which charger I have. I can plug everything into every other charger. I just got the Facebook Ray-Ban Wayfarers, and it's a USB-C port on the charging case, which means I can unplug my Chromebook and plug in the case to charge it. It's great. That's the life I want to live. I, however, hesitate in thinking it's a great idea to make it the law that everything have USB-C ports in it, not because I wouldn't like the immediate effect, but because down the road, I don't know what effect that has. And I worry that some better standard we never gets developed and we don't know about it because everybody's like, man, but we can't use it because we have to use USB-C without changing the law. Sure, we could go lobby and get the law changed, and there's a process for that, but it sounds like work to us, so we'll just keep using USB-C. There's those unintended consequences of making it the law that man, maybe that's just from growing up in the good old US of A, but it kind of concerns me.
Do you follow Benedict Evans?
I don't.
Okay. I know, is a mobile analyst. I want to say he might actually be in some VC firm now. I'm not sure. I know that he's friends with Ben Beharon, and so I've always been aware of him just because Ben retweets him a lot. I think I started following him this week, though, in particular, because he immediately, I don't want to say lashed out, but he was like, all right, so what if 5 years ago they had said USB 3? Right. I mean, what we don't know what kinds of changes are coming. We don't know what kinds of things people are working on. But if we legislate this, because right now they're saying, OK, this needs to be the standard. But even if the regulation passes, it's not going to go into effect until 2024.
Right.
So there's
2 years from point of passage. Right.
Right. Exactly. Which, I know we talk evolutionary, not revolutionary, but it's possible that somebody somewhere will come up with something better, even than Lightning or even than USB-C or something like that. It goes to what you were talking about a moment ago.
Yeah. And granted, in reality, probably what Apple does and maybe what others start to do, and maybe what would have happened anyway, is you go to wireless charging. You just get rid of the port altogether. And maybe that hurries this along, which may or may not be a good thing. But I tend to think in reality, this is a law that by the time it gets enacted isn't necessary anymore, because everything will have already gone to USB-C or become wireless by that point.
All right. You see, that's an interesting idea. I'd heard some people say, because of course there is immediately it's kind of funny because we're saying, well, we don't even know what it's going to be like in 3 years. But then we're like, okay, well, so then what is Apple going to do? And again, not doing the whole, we don't know what it's going to be like in 3 years. I mean, there were people who said, I want to say there might have been a piece in The Verge that said, well, this might actually push them finally to having a portless phone.
Yep.
Which I kind of hate that idea. There was another thing that said, well, they'll just have to put, whatever their really cool connector is and USB-C in the phone at the same time.
Oh, no, they wouldn't do that. That's too much stuff.
But it's, well, I mean,
holds up the phone too much, right?
I probably okay, that is a good question, and I don't know the answer. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when Johnny Ive was still doing all of their design, yes, that bulks up the phone far too much. Today, they're willing to get a little bit bigger to accommodate a better camera. They're willing to get a little bit bigger to accommodate, a couple of other things.
I think that's a good point.
It's possible.
Although there's a difference between a bump on the outside of the camera that looks ugly to Johnny Ive and taking space from the battery for an internal apparatus.
Yeah. Well, true. Okay. Here's the other thing, though. I don't know the letter of the law. I don't guess anybody knows the letter of the law since it's not really law yet.
It's still subject to amendments and all that, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, could you actually say, fine, we'll just have no port? Because if the whole point is everybody already has all of these chargers, so just start using that, and then everybody can use all these chargers. Yeah. If you say, well, no chargers except for a wireless pad, which you're now going to have to buy. I mean, does that fly? I'm wondering, if Apple came out with a phone that's like, okay, you don't plug anything into it, does the EC then have to go, well, no, hold on a second, because you have to have a way to plug something in, so go back and do it again.
Yeah, I think if I remember the way the proposal is now, it seemed to leave it open to interpretation that if there is a port, it has to be USB-C, but there might not need to be a port, because honestly, since everybody's kind of settled on the Qi wireless standard, except for the watch, and watches aren't part of this proposal anyway because they're too small. If you could just make Qi the wireless and have the same effect, which is everybody gets a wireless charging pad and they can charge all their stuff on it, right? That's the whole point of this, is to reduce waste and not have a bunch of wall warts sitting around doing nothing that you end up throwing away. Which I think is great. I think that's an admirable goal. I'm not sure this is the best way to get there, is all I'm saying. But yes, Qi wireless charging might get us there anyway. So I feel like this is going to be a law that a lot of people are going to be very upset about, and in the end won't do much of anything one way or another, which is often what happens with regulation.
Can we go another way really quickly? And forgive me, and if this upsets somebody, I apologize. I'm curious, though. I've had it in my head that the reason that politicians like to go after tech is because they can. They can't go after drug prices, at least here in the States. They can't go after drug prices because there's too much money tied into it. They can't go after health care because there's too much tied into it. They can't go after fossil fuels because there's too much tied into it. But if there's one thing that we can do something about, it is honestly an industry that's 30 to 50 years old, depending on which part of it you're talking about, as opposed to 100 to 200 years old. It feels to me like tech is the thing that every politician loves to go after at this point, because it is the one thing that they can actually affect, or think they can affect. Anyway.
You are mixing your metaphors with a lot of American examples there,
yes,
related to a European law. I don't think Europe is as adverse to going after some of those other industries, but
forgive me, I was backing off the EU part. I apologize.
Yeah. I think it is very interesting that in the U.S. You can go after tech because everybody hates it, right? Right. Like you're not going to lose a vote by going after tech right now, and I think there's a timer on that. Some of it is irrational hate for the thing that's new, right? Technology for most people, maybe not you and me or people in the audience, but most people is still new, right? And they don't understand it and don't understand the companies behind it. And I think, to your point, yes, these are new companies. Those companies are building up their lobbying institutions, building up their influence, but also people interact with it on a daily basis. As many people that take pharmaceuticals, not everybody interacts with it on a daily basis. Right. And it's certainly not a thing that has, come in and disrupted your life because you got in an argument with your grandpa on it, the way that the technology has. So yeah, there's a lot of factors in there, but all those factors kind of do feed back to what you said, which is like, it's new industry.